Yeah, yeah, that's super interesting. And I actually posted something on LinkedIn about the tariffs, and someone commented on that about how the U.S. is at a disadvantage because China is subsidizing certain industries, and they can kind of play that long game. And I don't know, they don't seem to be blinking yet in terms of wanting to bring down their tariffs or to end the trade war. And to be fair, neither is the United States so far, except they have made exceptions for Apple or for computers and cell phones, which I imagine was Apple's doing, because it was really interesting. I just read an article about the CEO of Apple and about how he came up through the ranks building that global supply chain that's highly dependent on China. And I remember it was either that day or the next day was when the U.S. came out and said that they were going to make an exception for Apple. So I don't know if I imagine he's lobbying or people like him are lobbying for exceptions from these tariffs. But other than Apple and computer and chip manufacturers, things like that, are there other industries or types of companies that are most affected by these trade wars?
Well, many industries, because like I said earlier, there are very few components. So the components is like the source of the product. Many of those are still all coming from China. And so it very much, or Southeast Asia. And then from the manufacturing landscape, they're out what China has done over the last 5 years, because this isn't the first time, Trump has kind of declared a trade war with China. He did it during his first term. And so for a lot of a lot of Chinese companies during that time frame, what they did is that they set up companies in Mexico, they set up companies in Vietnam, Chinese owned companies, that they're just another, I don't want to say a shell company, but they're another division, or another, yeah, division is probably the best word for it, but they're setting up another shop in another country, and then they're trying to avoid the tariff laws in that realm, or in that part of the world. And so that was the way that they kind of got around a lot of these tariff rules that were put in place during the first Trump administration. And then now we're coming into the second Trump administration. And for the Trump sort of economic team, what their strategy was is just cut everybody off at the knees and then manage the exceptions. That's how I'm kind of reading into it. It's,
Yeah.
for better or worse, I don't want to, I guess get into the political realm of things of who I support and who I don't support, but I do get it from just a bearish approach where you're just going to cut everything and then wait for the loudest cries. And then from those loudest cries, like an Apple, who has been solely dependent on, a foreign government for their entire supply chain, it's forcing them to have some tough conversations as well. They have shifted some of their manufacturing into neighboring countries. Vietnam and India are some of the big winners so far, but they really should be doing much more with the enormous amount of cash balance that they have. I mean, it's more than, some countries' GDP. And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit of, okay, we'll throw you a bone here, I think, from the Trump administration, if I'm reading between the lines, specifically when it comes to Apple. But they really should be. It's an American company. It's completely reliant on, foreign entities, and so it's probably about time that a company like Apple was bringing all of their products back. Now, it's still a knowledge-based gap. Do we have the skill set in the United States? Do we have the components of the components to be able to make the machinery and make the products and create the inputs, especially when it comes to semiconductors? Semiconductor manufacturing is predominantly handled in Taiwan. That has its own set of geopolitical issues that are going on, but it's mostly the electronic side of things that is being greatly impacted. Cars are kind of, especially US manufactured cars, if that kind of exists. Apple, I think, is a great example of an American company that is fully dependent on a foreign supply chain in order to manufacture their goods. We saw around the April 2nd, tariff deadlines, or the I guess the tariff announcements, that Apple was chartering 5 different planes in order to ship a lot of their iPhones out of Southeast Asia into the United States in order to avoid some of those extra costs. And so what I think we're seeing is that we're seeing an acceleration in things that were already happening. Now, for a lot of businesses, it's still going to be tough for them to find the component of the component, or even the machine that makes the machine. That's been the biggest problem with reshoring of American manufacturing, is that during the 90s, when essentially all of these manufacturing processes were shipped out of the United States, they were shipped over, but also we lost that knowledge base. And
Yeah.
so when you're talking about bringing some of that manufacturing back, we frankly don't have enough of the knowledge base of it, what it takes to make the component of the component, the machine that builds the machine. There are some interesting companies that are trying to do that in the United States and have been trying to do that for a few years now. If you're going to bring manufacturing back, what does that actually look like in a modern day sense? Are we going to bring everything back, or do are other things like toys and textiles? Does it make more sense to just let other countries handle that part of the job? And so there's a lot of questions that are being asked right now, but it's also a situation where some of these things were already happening, and now it's just further incentive to well, we have to also discuss the lack of incentives for a lot of these, manufacturing, I guess, initiatives to take place. The biggest difference between U.S. and China is that China subsidizes a lot of their manufacturing capabilities, where they will pick certain industries that they will subsidize, versus the United States, where it's kind of like figure it out. Like
Yeah.
it's up to you to figure it out, and both have pros and cons. Those are the probably, I guess, the industry or the commodity that is going to be impacted the between mid-size to large level. I would imagine that with car manufacturers in particular, they reshored a lot of their jobs, a lot of their capabilities already over to Mexico, and so they're kind of in a stagnant place right now where they can't really bring back a lot of those manufacturing jobs to the United States, where we were once building, a overwhelming majority of all the cars and trucks and vehicles in this country. That's been decimated as well.